Hi, it's Dan Harris, and welcome back to the Ironbird Podcast, where we explore the intricacies of private aviation with the industry's leading voices. Today, we're excited to have Andrew, the COO of Prime Jet, join us. Andrew gives us a behind-the-scenes look at operating an exclusive fleet of Gulfstream aircraft, the challenges of running a floating fleet, and what the future holds for Gulfstream aircraft in the charter marketplace and beyond. Whether you're a jet owner or a frequent charter client, this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Let's get started. All right, we'll jump into it. All right, Andrew, do you want to get into, how Prime Jet started and what the idea of the business was when you started it?
Sure. The idea of the business when we started it was 13 years ago. So my partners, Cheryl and Liz, and I bought the company 13 years ago. The company has existed since 2001, before that. So really the original impetus for the company was an individual who had sold his company as a pharmaceutical company, had gone public, made a lot of money, which was a good thing.
Yeah.
Back in those days, we had the 100% bonus depreciation, which sadly we don't have that right now.
Might be back.
That's what they're saying in Congress. They're saying that it should be coming back.
Yeah.
But this individual took advantage of that, bought 3 factory new G4SPs.
Wow.
They were $28 or $29 million a piece back in those days for a brand new G4SP.
Sounds like a deal these days.
It is a great deal.
A brand new airplane.
Yeah, it's 2001 dollars as well. So you know what that equates you today.
Yeah.
I haven't done that equation.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, bought them purely for the bonus depreciation. Obviously, sheltered a lot of the income that had been made from the IPO. At that point, gave it to Prime Jet, and Prime Jet was really one of the original companies that had this kind of floating fleet, point-to-point model, no owner's approval. The model was we own, we operate. So they were so successful with it that they actually chartered enough. They were setting Gulfstream utilization records.
Wow.
With how many hours they were flying per month and per year. And so all that revenue that was coming in was actually covering cost of capital. It was covering insurances, pilot salaries, maintenance, all these things. So the original owner was pleasantly surprised to say, hey, we're actually making a net profit in terms I was just looking to shelter, the income and save the taxes. It was a very successful business model. And so that's kind of what got us into Gulfstreams, not because we were intentional about Gulfstreams, but that's what the individual at that time had decided to purchase. So that went on until 2009, which we all know was, the housing financial crisis and whatnot. So those planes went from being $29 million down to $15 million.
Wow.
So obviously the banks were not thrilled about that. So they went to the old owner and said, hey, your bank to loan ratio doesn't really work for us. You're going to have to put more money on the table to keep these. He said, we're making the payment every month. We're making money. We're doing well, kind of basically screw you. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
They played hardball, went on for some time. Eventually, they demanded that was going to happen. And so he said, well, then we'll just shut the planes down and we'll close the operations from here on out. So everyone got a call on a Friday night and said, really sorry, but we're shutting down operations tomorrow. And planes are parked. It was like one in Argentina. I think there was one somewhere in New York, and I forget what the other one was, but it was kind of this shocker for the industry. I guess Prime Jet was a great name and had a lot of success at that time.
Yeah.
So anyway, Cheryl 𝗁𝗀𝗄, who's our CEO, she was the director of maintenance since 2001, and she went to the individual who owned the company before we did and said, hey, if you're not going to take the company, I'd be interested in acquiring the company from you and not doing ownership, but we would just do aircraft management.
Yeah.
So that happened, and in 2011, she acquired the company and became CEO, and she brought myself and my other partner, 𝗶𝘀𝘀𝗶𝗀, who's our CFO, on board. So that was kind of the reason for how we became, specifically Gulfstream. It's just what we knew.
Yeah.
And I was kind of equated, maybe it's a bad analogy, but I've said we're sort of like the Southwest Airlines of private aviation, because we stick to one model and we do it the best. That is a strategy in of itself. But it's not to say that we wouldn't be open to other aircraft. We just love the Gulfstream. We think it's a phenomenal aircraft. It's got ramp presence, the big oval windows.
Yeah.
It's got that, sits up high up on the ramp. It looks good. It's dependable. It's overbuilt. It's reliable. So we've just kind of stuck with that model, and it's worked well for us really since 2001.
How much more time do you think the Gulfstream 4 has to really be that prime charter kind of animal that it's probably if not the one of, it's probably the most popular charter airplane operating today. How long do you think that's going to last for?
Good question. We used to charter the G3s. We don't anymore.
Yeah.
I
so
believe.
when did the G3s drop off, right? And it's do you see a similar trajectory of when the G3s started to kind of drop off? And what makes that? Does it just make, is it, does the consumer drive that just says, hey, this airplane's a little older, or it doesn't have the range or the features I want? Or is it from a cost structure? It just gets too expensive. Parts get too expensive. It burns too much fuel. What do you think drives that kind of decline in airplane usage?
I think it's primarily the maintenance cost that's going to drive it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the consumer drives it too.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll get into that later too about my feelings on YOM and the importance and the non-correlation to safety. But that being said, I mean, I think they stopped making the G3s in 1986 or 87, and we stopped operating our last one probably 5 years ago.
Wow.
So by that, and the G4s began manufactured as a straight G4, 1988.
Yeah.
And they built them up until about 2002, I think was the last serial number.
Yeah.
So by that metric, I think we still have, at least 10, if not 15 years. And like you said, it's just a great aircraft. What blows my mind is you can go buy a brand new, like look at the G700 today. Is that a $70 million jet?
Yeah.
It's a $70 million jet, right? And it's beautiful, don't get me wrong. But I mean, you can buy a G4 for $4 million, $6 million, as long as it's got a good maintenance pedigree. You could put $1 million into a brand new interior. From the inside aesthetics, from the passenger standpoint, you're going to tell
It's going to be hard, right?
very hard to tell the difference.
Yeah.
Now, the pilots can tell the difference up in the cockpit. It's
Yeah.
clearly with the avionics.
Yeah.
But there is, zero correlation to safety and year of manufacture. That's a number one question we get all the time from our customers is, what's the year of make on this? Also, what's the year of refurb, which is important.
Yeah.
But nowhere in my career ever have I seen any correlation to the safety of the aircraft to the age of the aircraft. People equate them like it's a car, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a car. It's an
With
aircraft.
miles, yeah.
Yeah. And so
What do you think does correlate safety in the airplanes?
What correlates to the safety in the airplanes?
Yeah, so like if year of manufacture isn't a driver of safety, what do you think, like what should the consumer be asking to understand, like, okay, these are the things I feel good about some of the safety metrics or how maybe companies are operating airplanes?
Yeah, I think that's where you have to rely on a really good operator because to me, maintenance is everything. So I know when we're advising new clients that are about to buy an aircraft, the biggest question we say is, did you do a pre-buy? And please do it with us because we have some really good maintenance experts. I mean, our CEO is an A&P mechanic herself.
Yeah.
She came from that, that background. Our director of maintenance, Jason Mann, he was the general manager of Western Jet, now Standard Aero for, I think, 20 plus years.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy has seen every Gulfstream. He knows them by serial numbers. He's probably worked on the vast majority of them. And they know. They know the ones that have the gremlins, that have the companies that manage them, that either pencil whip maintenance or, didn't exactly do it up to the best standard. So the pedigree is huge. And the only way to know that is to have a trusted partner and a good operator that, you're working with.
What are some of the things when people are buying airplanes? So, you've got these $4 to $6 million Gulfstreams. You're probably looking at two $5 million Gulfstreams, not too far apart serial numbers, maybe even the features or upgrades are similar, but one may have these reoccurring issues, one may not. Who's going to help you find which one to buy?
It's going to be in that pre-buy.
Yeah.
So, I see a lot of people make that mistake.
It's not going to be an aircraft broker, right? Because they probably don't know that, right?
Correct. Yeah, and their focus is on making the sale of the aircraft, right? And maintenance is a completely different animal. And I'm not a maintainer myself.
Yeah.
I'm more on the sales and operations side, so I rely on my team to provide that expertise. But the one thing I say, if someone's coming to get a jet, is before you make a decision and you sign the dotted line or finish your, LOI, make sure that you've got a solid pre-buy inspection to happen, because that 1 or 2 days to go look through the records of the airplane, to talk to the mechanics who've actually worked on it, to see which shops have worked on it, that's going to pay dividends.
So you can even see like, this shop was working on this airplane versus another shop that like these guys I know do a legitimate job and wouldn't let anything go through, and these guys might push through some other things that, like with some pressure, they just might, duct tape some things. Not exactly, but
hopefully it's not duct tape, but absolutely. I mean, that's where, like I said, the value of, our Jason Mann, our Cheryl Jenke, they have worked around many of these shops. They know the people that work there. They know the kind of quality they work at. They've seen the mistakes that we've made by sending them to the wrong shops.
Yeah.
So looking through those logbooks, it's all written per FAA regulations. So what's going on. If you see some squawk that comes up repeatedly, it's like, there's something going on. There's a gremlin there, and it's good to know that.
Yeah, they haven't figured that out. And where like some people may just like, oh yeah, nothing major coming up. Yeah, let's just go buy this airplane.
Right. And I think it's about setting expectations. It's not like there's some airplanes that are just fundamentally bad. They can be fixed.
Yeah.
But the owner needs to know.
Yeah.
If I'm
Here's
gonna
what's
buy
going to cost
right.
to
I'm
fix this airplane.
Buy a G4, but it's got 500 hours left on the engines until overhaul, or it's coming up on its 5,000 landing, which is easily $1.5 million maintenance event.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you understand that, and you're prepared for that, because those maintenance bills can absolutely.
What's the worst maintenance bill you've seen on a Gulfstream?
I mean, we've definitely seen a bill over $2 million. It would be the 5,000 cycle. That's a big one. And that particular owner made a bad mistake of going to the wrong shop. I don't want to name any names, but went to a shop that we never would have advised. Mm-hmm. And I think had they gone our route, they'd have been probably 1.3 million.
Really?
They'd have been a lot less.
And how are maintenance shops that different in pricing? How does that work? Are people just throwing parts at things that they just don't know the problem, so they're just like guessing on parts and you're paying for that, or are they just overcharging?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, the bigger corporate type of places, might just kind of get in there and they're going to find more squawks, and that means more labor and more time for them. Where some of the smaller, mom and pop type of shops, they're real boots on the ground, they're real active, they're talking to you, they know our staff, they're in communications every day, and there's nothing that can be taken advantage of at that point. We're on the same page. We can get in there and even work on the plate together with them too.
Yeah, so one huge takeaway is when you're buying an airplane, make sure you have most likely operator representative from the maintenance side that's going to help you in that pre-buy.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be there are brokers that do that, but I guess my focus is if you're going to talk to a broker who are going to talk to you, make sure that somebody has that maintenance background,
technical expertise. Yeah,
the maintenance is the biggest cost of operation.
Yeah,
everything else pales in comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's that purchase price and the maintenance, right? If you can find that sweet spot in a good purchase price, a good maintenance history, that's a match made in heaven for airplane ownership.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that seems to be the goal when you're buying an airplane, how to make that purchase a positive experience versus one that I've seen people buy an airplane and then continuous maintenance issues kind of sour that airplane owner on ownership, and then they usually move away to fractional or jet card or something that's that less kind of churn in that airplane ownership experience.
True. Yeah, they don't want that headache, and I mean that's the worst surprise you can have, right? You bought this new jet and you're all happy and you got a good price and you're getting good charter, and all of a sudden the thing is down for 3 months because it's got a major corrosion issue or whatever else came up, and you're writing the check for that. Things
that could have been found probably in a really good pre-buy if you have a good team around you, especially first-time airplane owners.
Yeah.
That's like, I see, anytime I see those bad experiences with first-time airplane owners, I just see, well, like someone's ruined that person's experience from owning an airplane ever again. Mm-hmm. That person will never, if they have a really poor experience the first time out, they'll never own another airplane again.
Yeah.
And it's maybe they had a broker force them into an airplane because it was a better commission, or they were trying to speed a deal up and they didn't do that due diligence. And now they are stuck with an airplane that doesn't meet their expectations, and they probably lose money on it, unhappy. And then the industry as a whole, at least the charter industry, has now lost a customer to fractional or something else.
Yeah. And I think the other kind of stigma we have is charter companies.
Yeah.
Charter companies have a very negative stigma in this industry. And, you hear that from, I even think of the interview you did with 𝗵𝘁'𝘀𝗶𝗄 Jets. They talk about, we don't want anything to do with charter.
Yeah.
𝗵𝘁'𝘀𝗄𝗏 Jets are good friends of ours.
Yeah.
We talk a lot with them. I've got another company, a friend, Duke Aviation out of Salt Lake City, and he told me the same thing. We don't want anything to do with charter. Our clients, they don't trust charter companies. They've been screwed. And it's true. I mean, there's so many bad instances out there that could have totally been prevented. And so one of our real goals at Prime Jet is the purpose of our company, our purpose statement is really trusted. We believe in trusted partnerships.
Yeah.
It's really important to us that we want to build that trust. We don't want to BS people. We want them to have a good experience, because there's been so many places and times where they've been taken advantage of or just not looked at the big picture, and then they walk away and like you said, they go to fractional, they go to jet cards. And
or I have seen airplanes that move every 2 years from one airplane operator to the next. Now, it could just be an owner expectation standpoint, but when you get an airplane on certificate, what's the average time that airplanes are staying on certificate?
We have a great retention rate. I mean, the last couple of years, our fleet has shrunk a little bit, That's more a function of just the economy, what's happened. Charter's gone down, costs have gone up so extraordinary amounts. So we actually had one owner with 3 G4s actually went into bankruptcy.
Really?
Which was a pretty interesting experience. Not fun
Yeah.
for us, but fortunately we became secured debtors on that through court.
Yeah.
And did eventually get our money back.
Yeah.
Once the things were auctioned off. But that aside, we don't have a lot of clients that leave us because they're unhappy with the way we're treating them or because we haven't delivered on what we promised.
Yeah.
We like to kind of under-promise and over-deliver, is our thing. We don't want to surprise anybody ever, so we're super transparent, just tell people how it's going to be, set the expectations realistically, what we can, what we can't do, keep them up to tune, on a daily basis as to how their aircraft is performing.
How do you provide accurate budgets when people are looking to purchase an airplane, put it on certificate, and then go into charter?
Every airplane is an individual budget. So we have kind of a boiler template for what a G4 should do or what a G5 should do. But to your point, they're all different. I mean, especially with the 450s and 5s right now, they have maintenance contracts, whether on the MSP avionics, mechanical, whether they're on a Rolls-Royce corporate carrier, that has a huge effect on what the DOCs are going to be and how that budget's going to play out. So I'm a data person. I like to look at data from models that we have.
Yeah.
And put that into a future model and then forecast. So here's what we're actually doing in charter sales. Here's where the rates are actually transacting at. Here's where the actual bills are coming on in a similar type. Now let's look at what this aircraft has going moving forward, plug it in and get a pretty close forecast.
Are you seeing, when you maybe go for like a RFP on a new G4 555, are you seeing, big differences between what you're presenting and what other people are?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't, if it's an airplane, everything pretty much costs what it costs? Why are there differences? Are other people able to do different things with these airplanes that can change costs that much?
That's a point of frustration I have too. I think there's a little bit of bait and switch that we have in this industry that can happen. And, you pull a rate from what we could sell the planes around 2 years ago, and then put that out there. And, a lot of people say, I don't charge positioning, but you do charge position because you have a higher rate or whatever. There's a lot of ways to cover that truth up.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating from us from a standpoint of competition because it should be the same. That's why I think the more that this industry can do in terms of sharing information, being open and transparent about what it is or what it isn't.
Yeah.
You and I know what it costs to charter G4. We do it all the time.
Yeah.
So when I see a proposal from a competitor saying they can get, $7,000 an hour on a G4, I'm like, it's not.
Yeah,
that's not what's being traded at right now. And there's more. The devil's in the details. And my fear is that some of them have the mentality that, well, I get them in, and once they're in, it's going to be too hard to leave. And it is what it is. We don't ever want that experience.
Why is it hard to leave?
Yeah, your pilots. You just dropped all this money for training. You got to have a new training event to come back on a certificate.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's not only the cost of the training, but it's the time down for that.
Yep.
It's the time of conformity. We do provide, we pride ourselves on our time of conformity. We're usually like 2-3 weeks, which is, I think, a lot better than what a lot of competitors can do.
Yeah.
That's one of our definite niches we have. But nonetheless, it's 3 weeks, of downtime. It's shipping the logbooks around. It's, not being able to use your asset during that time and having to repay for a training that you already paid for. So it's
it's basically if people can kind of sell this fake budget, right? Or just kind of looks a little bit better than it should. They know that once they get you on their certificate, you're not going to want to lose that month to 2 months of potential charter revenue to switch. The cost of switching is too high. They'll just kind of apologize after the fact that rates aren't there, or even I've seen maintenance costs, different maintenance costs. Right. It's how am I seeing 5 different maintenance costs in these budgets? This airplane is pretty straightforward of where it's at in its maintenance journey, its hours, its next large maintenance event coming up.
Yeah.
Everything should be somewhat identical outside of maybe little differences in aircraft management fees or hangar fees. And even then, it shouldn't be that much different, right?
No, it really shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It should be pretty equitable. And, it's about, and you can always use the excuse, well, marketing conditions changed and whatever it is. But you should be able to give them a range and say, well, here's where, in the worst times, this is what it's done. And here's in the best times what it could do.
Yeah.
The other thing that kind of drives me crazy too is people want to talk about hours only. I flew 70 hours last month. It's like, okay, that's great. But at what rate did you fly those?
Yeah.
How many of those were unpaid position hours? Like I know we had a conversation with a potential owner the other day, and he said, "Oh yeah, 10 or 15% of my flights are just position flights, and I don't get paid for them." So they just bid it like out of the plane where it's coming from, where it's going to. And it's like, well, who's paying for that position flight?
Yeah.
You are as the owner. That's not cool.
Yeah.
You know,
you're moving your asset. You're paying for fuel.
Right.
You should be, at least getting something back for that. But I think in the normal structure, it's basically like, hey, every hour this airplane flies, you're going to get paid this. Right. And I've always seen pretty much like two different structures. It's usually a flat payback rate, or it's some sort of shared revenue rate. So it's like some people want to take the risk, because if we can sell for more, great, I win. If we sell for less, I share in those losses. Where other people just say, hey, here's what I need to make on this airplane. Pay me this flat rate. Where do you guys usually kind of fit in that structure?
So yeah, we've done both. Today, almost everything is a split. It is just simpler because whether it's a minimum or it's a base charge or it's a any kind of revenue, it's a cancellation fee. We have a predetermined just split, and you're looking at
any
big
revenue
picture.
at all you split?
Not any. I mean, the ancillaries, things like the flight attendant costs, the overnights, we take care of those things. But anything that has to do with the actual charter of the aircraft, be it short leg fees, minimums, fuel surcharges, those are all predefined and split. It makes it easier because then you're looking bigger picture. And I can say at the end of the month, you flew 62.5 hours for X amount of revenue, and that's this rate per hour. And we pride ourselves in that we always are at a better effective rate per hour than what we bid as a default. So that's always we call it the gravy. In our business. So that's gravy. And the gravy is deserved to be, shared.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're going to be transparent with these owners about doing that.
How have you set up your structure with the airplanes, with your strategy on floating them? Where do you put the airplanes? Where you try and keep the airplanes to? What's your strategy around that?
So that changed a lot in about 2015 for us. We used to be traditional base, owner's approval.
Start from Van Nuys. If you're out to Aspen, you're going to be back to Van Nuys, or out to New York, back to Van Nuys.
Right. And in a trip like New York, I mean, it's not going to sell because you're going to be, twice the price of what it would be. I mean, if you're $42K to go on a one-way in a G4 today, you're going to be $84 to be a round-trip price. So we did start out that way. And there's a market for that. We still have aircraft today that do that. For an owner who is going to use his plane a lot more, and just wants 200 or 300 hours of charter, it's a great model.
Bring that airplane back, and it's where it's home base, and if he needs it, he or she can have access to it.
Exactly, and it's simple because there's no risk out there. When you're on the road, you can predict your costs. The floating model is a lot more interesting, and we've been developing that now really since, like I said, 2015 was our first kind of point-to-point floater. And the great thing is, from the consumer standpoint, you're only paying for that point-to-point price. You're not paying for that positioning. From our standpoint, we have to risk, I'm in Teterboro now. I got 3 hotels. I got 3 per diems. I've got parking costs. If it's going to start snowing, I might be stuck with the de-icing bill. So there is more risk there, but it's in the volume that, we can continue to move that airplane around.
So how many more hours do you think you can make on a float? How many more hours can an airplane operate, you think, on average, on a floating model versus a home-based model?
Well, they're going to make, first of all, making money in airplanes is kind of the thing of the past.
How many more hours do you think they can access?
A lot.
Yeah,
a lot. And the big thing is, and it's sometimes scary for the aircraft owner because you have to commit a lot more. So if we're only going to fly 300 to 400 hours a year, we're comfortable with 2 pilots. That's an okay quality of life, Once you go 400 to 600 annually, you definitely need a 3rd pilot in there so that people can have a quality of life and have days off. Once you start going over 600, we use 4 pilots. So we have 2 PICs and 2 SICs. And so the plane is just always crewed. You're not worried about that. So also for the pilot's quality of life, having defined time off. So it's a lot more.
It's more of a schedule for the pilots.
It's like a great schedule.
7 on or 7 off or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, ours is actually 15 on, 13 off, but essentially it's a better life for the pilots. They'll be happier. They're willing to work hard during those 15 days on. But from the aircraft owner, he might be saying, "Oh, I have 4 pilot salaries. That's a lot." But you're going to be able to fly. When times were good in 21, 2022 after COVID, we had a couple aircraft that were able to exceed 1,000 hours annually of charter, which then you can get to a point where you can actually start covering. Not only your ACMI, but even cost of capital as well,
Where's that, if you're budgeting airplanes and as hours kind of continue to go up, your costs go up. Is there a point where it's like, is there a sweet spot of like, all right, at this many hours with 3 pilots, or this many hours with 4 pilots, or this many hours with 2 pilots, where like your cost, your cost is at a point where your revenue is a little bit higher? Is it just like the more hours the better, or where have you seen the sweet spot in operating airplanes?
So I don't think there's a good answer to that, because it depends on the owner. It just depends on the goals of what the owners want. If you're wanting to try to make money with an airplane, you probably shouldn't be here. You know, just maybe you just want to charter. You know, I mean, there's a space and time where you can make money. Certainly, if you take the cost of capital and the taxes out, you know, you can say that you made money at that point. But it just truly depends on the goals of the owner. So we custom tailor with each of our clients kind of what they're looking to do. But from a bottom line standpoint, the floating fleet, high utilization is going to yield the best. You know?
There's not like, oh, when you got a 3rd pilot in 600 hours, it's like, if you're going to do it, you might as well do 4 pilots and fly that airplane as much as possible, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that model works great if you're an owner and you're flying 50 hours or less. That's ideal, because with 50 hours or less, we're not going to ask for your approval. We're just going to take the airplane. Your utilization is so low. We'll just keep hustling and removing it. We'll have those 4 pilots. And, you know, you will, again, cost of capital and taxes aside, you know, you can come close to breaking that even. And so you're flying 50 hours for basically free at that point, you know, if you want to look at it that way. So it's a good deal.
You're backtracking it based on like owner needs and usage. Depending on, you need it 50, 100. Here's how far in advance you need this airplane to be at home base. You're kind of building that custom model around the airplane owner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How tough is that on like a back office to manage when you've got all these different airplanes floating around, you're moving each airplane? What's that like from a back office standpoint of how to sell those flights and operationally like dispatch and manage them?
A lot of stress and a lot. You know, it's almost like a big chess puzzle. You know, it's fun. Like when I look at a flight boards, it's just, you know, you see where you got to move, what you have. You've got all these requests coming in. And I mean, that's the song and dance that the sales team is doing on a daily basis. And we get hundreds of quote requests every single day. And it's a matter of finding, you know, the right matches to the haves and the needs, and then just optimizing that board. And then, you know, you throw in a mechanical problem and it makes things even more fun. Now you're trying to plug in other trips and keep things covered up.
Have you seen any good pieces of technology recently that might help you kind of manage that?
AI. I think it's going to be interesting. We've kind of started exploring just with AI and lots of different areas, and I've been pretty blown away by how good of a job it does. Of just
really, I use AI like ChatGPT constantly. I find myself talking more to ChatGPT than other people some days.
Have you named your ChatGPT?
No, I haven't, but I play around with a lot of it, and I've got like different things for different like jobs. And I really want AI to come to a point where at first I just want it to track airplanes. So if we've got a trip on an airplane in a day or in 2 days from now, I want that AI to look at where's this airplane now? Where's it going? It's landing at this time. What does that mean for crew duty for the next day for my flight? Or it's going to a high risk airport with bad weather. You know, I want it to just kind of start to track these airplanes a little bit more intelligently and be able to say, 12 hours ahead, 24 hours ahead, hey, this airplane's currently on a high risk flight or high risk other flights. Keep a close eye on it because you may need maybe a delay. It may get stuck somewhere. That's the first thing I want for AI to do. The next thing I want AI to do is a little bit more customer support. So if someone's like, hey, Judy's not on this flight, but we're bringing Bob, right? I don't need to like delete Judy and then add Bob. That's something that's pretty simple. That AI should be able to take Bob's name and his date of birth and run it over the TSA pre-check, make sure it doesn't have any operational changes based on his weight, and do all those simple things that currently dispatchers do or people do, and then send an updated itinerary. Like those are pretty simple things that I would like AI to start doing to save us some time. Is really like my current dream for AI. For you, it's probably actively moving schedules around and then being like, oh, well, I need to fill this route. Let me pull every single request I've had that's close to that route. Let me re-quote them again and figure out how I can close these things.
Absolutely, because today that's done by a human. I mean, if our sales team could spend more time on the phones, having relationships with people, being out on the road, versus, fishing through hundreds of requests and trying to noodle through the quotes and, make those things happen, I think that there's a lot of value there. But people are afraid of AI. Even in our own company, we have people who are, oh, I don't know, I don't trust it or whatever it is. And once I started playing with it, I was like, it's
incredible.
It's not going to replace people's jobs, and everyone's worried, it's going to take my job. It's not going to take job. No. It's just when I use it, it's like me on superpowers. It's like me with super armor or whatever it is. So it augments what you do, and if we can get rid of some of the little tasky oriented things, whether it's changing manifests or whether it's optimizing a schedule, that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited for that. See where that goes.
My wife uses it to write emails and text messages nicer. She's not that she's dry, but I'm like, hey, like you can't send that to somebody. Like that's like, well, put in some pleasantries or so, soften it up. She needs to soften up some of her text communication. Very nice in person when you're talking to her, but for whatever reason, when she's like sending things over text or email, it's like very like sharp. I'm like, you gotta. So she now runs these things through. She's like, hey, can you like make this nicer for me? Yeah. And she'll like run it through ChatGPT and she'll send like nicer. Like I'll get a text from her. I'm like, oh, that's too nice. I was like, there's no way you wrote this text.
That's the trick is trying to balance to use it, but not let people know you're using it. It's like I've used it to write different newsletters and articles and deals like that. But
a lot of
say something and I'm like, oh, that's not too smart. That vocabulary is way more vocabulary than I'd ever use. So dumb it down a little bit.
Yeah, 5th grade reading level. Yeah, I know. But with the Gulfstream 4s, and I know we kind of talked about how much more life they have left, where do you see the market moving towards? Is it 450s? Is it 550s? Like, where do you see that market, one that transitioned from G3s to G4s, where do you see the G4 market eventually transitioning to?
Well, I mean, the natural plane is going to be the G450. The challenge that we're having right now within our own fleet, with the 450s and the 5s, is that some of these maintenance contract costs have gone up. Like we have a G550, right? We were comparing the 2021 numbers to today. We have a 107% increase in the maintenance contracts, and they're covering less and less items on top of that. So something like a simple display unit, which they're dealing with some obsolescence issues as well. On a G4, that might cost $80,000. It might cost $200 and something.
Wow.
On a G5. So that's been the real challenge in the 450s and 5s.
Why is that? Just because they can?
I think it's because they can. I mean, it's controlled by Gulfstream. That's where the G4SP is kind of the sweet spot right now, because there are a lot of them out there. There's parts available, but there will come a time where more of those age out and there's less parts available. That's where the economics come into play, where it doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
So the hope is that by that time there's more parts available and there's more availability in procuring parts for some of these new aircraft to make them more economically viable.
Because a lot of G4s right now, parts from G4s are coming from airplanes that they basically someone's bought the airplane as a full airplane and then just completely disassembled it and they bought it for the parts, right?
Right.
Right now there's not that for the 450s, maybe some 5s, but really not for the 450s or the 550s, right?
Correct. I mean, they haven't parted those airplanes out because, there's just not
a lot of life in them.
Yeah, I mean, they started building those in 2004, I believe when it was. So, until you get up to a high airframe time or the engines are, basically done, it's not going to make sense to.
It's pretty much the engines that will then define, because they're the most expensive thing to replace. Yeah. So when the engines get to a certain number, that said, all right, well, engines are too expensive. Let's just part the rest of the airplane out.
Right. I mean, if the engines cost you a couple $1 million and the airframe's only worth $500K at that point, you just
not worth it. It's worth more as parts than it is as an airframe.
Exactly. So we found that the newer serial number G4SPs is a real sweet spot right now.
Yep.
Of course, that's changing through time. Even like the legacy straight G4s, we still operate some of them, and you really have to find the right one there because. Like, for example, the ASC 190s, the landing gear mod that they did to basically make a straightforward in SP. If you don't have that, it's a challenging airplane from a weight and balance. It's a challenging airplane from a braking standpoint. There's a lot of issues and things with that. So 1400 number, serial number, or new G4SP is to me, the sweetest spot today.
And what are they price-wise?
Well, I mean... On the low side, you could find it for $2.5 if you've got things coming up due. I think a really nice one, $6-7 million right now for an SP.
How often are you seeing people buy those airplanes that have the big events coming up? Like, is that from a strategy standpoint? How is that like? Hey, this airplane's got a huge event coming up. You know, I know it might cost me $1.5 million. Are you seeing that discount? Are you gonna make? Is the value there from a discount standpoint on the purchase price?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the brokers are doing their job, right? I mean, they're forecasting out and saying, I've got this coming up, and you're going to see that reflected.
Yeah.
Certainly, if the engines are coming due, like we just sold the G4 that has, I think, 500 or 600 hours left on the engines. And so they paid a really nice price for it, but they know in 500-600 hours, they're going to bite that bullet.
Yeah.
And
Do
go ahead and
you think
upgrade
they
those.
end up replacing engines, or they part it out at that point?
With that particular owner, they are going to do the overhaul. So it just depends, again, on the mission of that particular aircraft owner.
What's that like? What's an engine overhaul look like on a G4?
Oh, gosh, you're asking the wrong guy there. I know it's in the millions. I don't know the numbers.
Yeah, so you got to look at an airplane that's, you say, oh, with new engines, this airplane's a $5 million airplane, but I'm going to buy it for 1.5 or 2, right? And I'm going to make $1 million. Well, not make. I'm going to save $1 million.
Reserve.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What are your thoughts? I get interesting feedback on this on maintenance programs. Are all your airplanes on maintenance programs, or do you have some airplanes that are not on any programs, or select ones?
It's a smorgasbord. Some of them are, some of them aren't, and that is the golden question right there. Because you could Rolls-Royce corporate carrier, and then you're paying into it every hour, which it's a lot of cash flow for you up front. Yep. But then if there is an issue with the engine, or you come to that overhaul time, at least you know it's already paid for, and that's going to hold the value of that airplane a lot. If you do have to go and sell that airplane, if you take the decision to not put it on programs, it's kind of like an insurance program, right? So now you're hopefully you're reserving it for your own self in case something does go wrong, but you also have to know that if you're going to go sell that airplane, you're going to lose that value because the new potential owner is not going to have that paid into program.
If you're looking at an airplane that's kind of closer to end of life, is at some point I'm just going to run this airplane until it's, I'll buy a $2 million G4, and that's probably what a lot of the $2 million G4s are, right?
Yeah.
You're probably the last owner. It's got maybe 1,000 hours-ish left on this airframe, right? Can I buy this airplane, run it for those 1,000, 1,500 hours, and maybe, hopefully, it runs well for those 1,500 hours, and then I'm going to part it out for, what's a G4 when you part it out? A couple hundred?
Oh, no, I think, what would you buy it for?
What could you get when you part a G4 out?
I'm not the expert in those numbers, but I think it's a pretty lucrative business.
Yeah.
We have some customers that are in that business.
Yep.
And you need to start to look at each individual component, which you can get for them versus what you can buy the whole airframe from. That's a money-making business for some people, for sure.
I had the guys from Fly Alliance on, and they are buying 2 to 3 Gulfstreams just for parts. Now, they have a big parts business.
Yeah.
But that's like a big section of their business of just buying airplanes, parting them out. It's probably, I don't know if it's easier than charter, but it's probably less stressful than charter is.
I think we face it. Everything in aviation is pretty stressful.
Yeah.
You don't come into this business you got to be passionate about this business. You got to love this business if you want to be here, because it's not easy making money in aviation. I think we all know that.
How'd you get into the business? Like, what got you first into aviation?
Me personally, I don't know what got me into aviation. I think back actually to my computer class in 5th grade. People were on there playing Oregon Trails or whatever they were, and there was a Microsoft flight simulator that was available on one of the school computers, and I was like, this looks kind of interesting. I'm kind of into it, and that was my first moment I can remember being interested in an airplane.
Yeah.
So I learned to fly on a flight simulator, and I have known my family that's in aviation, so I don't know where it actually came from. But then started flying sailplanes out in Llano, out in the Palmdale Desert out there. I was 14, so I was flying before I was driving.
That's pretty cool.
And then ended up getting my single engine private pilot's license right around the time I was graduating high school. With the original goal, I was going to go in the Air Force and fly. I wanted to be a fighter pilot.
That's cool.
Love Top Gun, probably my other inspiring moment of aviation, like a lot of us probably. But unfortunately, with an astigmatism in my right eye, they were telling me, well, there's no chance that you're going to get the pilot slot. It's a very competitive thing to get a pilot slot in the Air Force. So ended up finishing my degree out in aerospace engineering, and just kind of looked for something in aviation. Didn't really like engineering because it was too technical, and I wanted something more actively involved with airplanes. And that's actually when I got a call from the original Prime Jet. Actually, David Duke, who was he was my position. He was the COO and president at that time. So he called me. I was at a national test pilot school out in Mojave doing a short course out there to try to figure out how to take my engineering skills with my piloting skills and do something.
Yeah.
And he goes, hey, have you ever thought about being a dispatcher and doing charter management? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But I'll come talk to you and see, So ended up having an interview with the old Prime Jet. We call it the 1.0 version because it's before we owned it. And they called me back and they basically said, good news and bad news. The good news is, first the bad news. They said, the bad news is we're not going to hire you. I'm like, okay, well, what's the good news, you know? Well, the good news is you were overqualified for this position. We got this sister company in Scottsdale, so they need more of a manager over there. So why don't you go over there and give them a shot? So I'm like, hey, I'll do it. So kind of got my feet wet in the business aviation world. And then started going to MBAAs, schedules and dispatchers. And that's, in my opinion, what this industry is all about. It's relationships.
Yeah,
so
it's a people business for sure.
Yeah.
So when was that? So how long have you been in the industry now?
It's been about 18 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's around the same time I started.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
I think you were with TWC at that point, right?
Yeah. I remember there was like a little Prime Jet office on like the McGuire building.
Exactly.
That was a while ago. They knocked that building down, right?
Yeah, it's no longer there. It's well, I think part of it is down. It was the old Millionaire, actually, which is now Signature North, I believe.
Yeah, like a little bit of Signature, and Jet took some of that space over too. What have you seen, kind of recently in the market of just like the domestic travel versus international? How has that changed kind of post-COVID now?
Well, certainly it's been fluctuating. I mean, I was going to say, when COVID happened, we furloughed like 95% of our staff. Yeah. It was crazy. We thought, things were over or whatever it was. But the interesting thing is the missions that got us back on our feet were these repatriation missions, flying foreign students basically had no way to get out of the country back to their home country. So at that time, it was like 100% international. Yeah. And then as everything started to open up more, and as time got busier and busier, then we really kind of morphed more towards domestic, actually. So I don't have the number in front of me what we're doing. I would say it's probably 75% domestic, 25% international.
Yep.
If I had to shoot from the hip. But international travel has just gotten so difficult.
Yeah.
Especially Europe. You got these like crazy parking fees that don't even have parking.
Yep.
They charge you an arm and a leg to even do it. You got to get all these permits done.
It used to be just like Italy in the summer, right? That used to be, all right, Italy in the summer stuff and Mykonos, Greece is a little tough, but now it's like a lot more places seem to be getting really difficult, and you can't, like, the tough part is a lot of places, if you have to switch tails last minute, that's like a almost impossible thing to do.
It is. It's actually funny because I always see the request. I have a pop-up to Paris. I'm like, there's no such thing as a pop-up to Paris. Yeah. It's a 2 to 3 business day, and business day, Monday through Friday. So if it's Saturday, you're shit out of luck,
Yeah.
And it's tail specific, it's operator specific, so it's not like a transferable thing. Yeah. So we're always kind of trying to educate our customers on that you're stuck onto this, and if it doesn't work out, you're gonna have to have some flexibility.
Yeah. Basically, you have to have commercial as your backup. Yeah. That's really your only backup in international travel.
Exactly.
Is a commercial flight book, because if this airplane can't make it, then we can't move you to another airplane. The permitting process, and it's only getting more difficult, right? You'd figure it would get easier, but it's not.
Yeah.
And like with any like heightened geopolitical issues, that only makes things even harder, right?
Right.
Different countries don't want to talk to different countries now, and as relationships sour with different countries, it's like, now it's even harder. You would figure things would be easier to get permits and be able to move around, but things seem to just be getting harder and harder.
You would think that, wouldn't you?
It doesn't make sense.
If you were to look at a flight from, let's just say, London to Singapore, it's like you're navigating the Ganges River at that point, because all these FIRs that you can't go through, you got war zones, you've got different areas you can't overfly. You got this GPS jamming that's a real thing now too. Yep. Which is pretty scary. You're flying along as a pilot, and all of a sudden your GPS says that you're over here, and you're 3 countries over here. So that's been a big safety risk thing that we've been looking at as well.
What are they kind of saying about that? Is that over certain countries, or can anyone do that, or?
Anyone can, I guess, technically do it. They're seeing it mostly in the Middle East right now, the spoofing. Yeah. But I think there's been cases of it even happening to some extent in Europe and the U.S. too. So that's where I have a good pilot that knows how to fly the old school needles. The VORs,
that's what you need, right?
Yeah, exactly.
As your only backup. Wow, that's wild. And I was actually having a conversation with Colin about this on the difference between booking on an app versus utilizing, more concierge service. What do you think the differences are from a client standpoint? Like, what are you not getting with an app that you might get when you actually call and talk to somebody?
So, I'm always looking at the different platforms that are out there, and every year I go to 𝗵𝗶𝘁𝗶𝗀, and there's always at least 10 new ones out there. And so the way I see it is I just don't see, I think there's a room for technology in booking, but I think especially if it's coming to a Gulfstream, I mean, if our average transaction is like $65,000, I don't think that people want to just do that on an app. I think they want to talk to somebody and have a relationship. I know for me, I certainly would want to do that. I'm not going to click on a button and say, hey, 70 grand, send it over. I mean, it's more than just the picture of the airplane and the price. You want to know who you're talking to, how they're going to operate that, what they're going to do if, what that operator looks like. That's where there's that huge value that the broker is providing that I don't think that's going anywhere anytime. Yeah. If it's a small jet, it's a King Air, I could see maybe it's easier to book it on an app.
Or if you're going to LA, Vegas, right? It's a pretty simple flight, pretty straightforward, pretty low risk flight.
Right.
But if you're going to Aspen, or some maybe higher difficulty, you probably want to understand that you've got someone that knows what they're doing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Or if international is another great example too. I mean, if we're going to take a G4 from LA to say, I don't know, Poland or something like that. I mean, you're going to do a fuel stop. You're going to have a crew change. You've got permit. There's a lot of moving parts there that you're not going to just have an app just solve that, I don't think.
Yeah. And you can probably book it on the app, but it's not going to tell you all these things, right?
Correct.
Yeah. It'll give you basically an airplane and the price. And another thing that I have a hard time with some of the apps, and I think it's moving that way, so I think eventually we'll probably get there, but when you look, there could be 4 different operators operating Gulfstream 4s. How do you tell the difference outside of price between these 4 operators? If they all have similar safety ratings, like not being able to truly understand what the difference is between the pilots and be like, oh, well, I know this tail number and I know the interior, or I know the pilots and I know where the insurance is on this operator and all these things. I think that goes into like that broker versus app. Like, that's where I think brokers should be adding value. I think too many are probably just transactional. And the idea of a broker is someone that can add value and expertise that maybe an app can't. But, I mean, you've probably dealt with plenty of people that are just purely transactional that don't really have maybe that experience, that can understand, hey, here's what we're trying to do. I know we're stretching a duty day. What can we do? Can we, crew rest or swap? People are just like, hey, I just need to do this, and don't understand the restrictions of it. From your standpoint as an operator, where do you see and the value a broker brings to like the client experience?
Well, the value that they bring, I believe, is in being able to explain the nuances of all the operators that are there. Because I mean, we know who the good operators are and who the ones that are the ones that you're like, okay, use them if you have to, kind of a thing. Unfortunately, price is such a thing in our industry, but I hope that we can get to a place where it's not, where there's a reason why here's a G4 operator, whoever it is, but here's a G4 operated by Prime Jet. It's worth an extra 10%, whatever it is. I mean, it's still going to be a lot of money to spend, but knowing that you've got a large fleet that's going to back up, that we have 97% dispatch reliability rate, that, our purpose of our company is literally not to bullshit people. We want to build trust. That is only earned over time as a reputation, where if you don't have that broker relationship, you're reliant on someone else telling you how it is, and you just don't know. There's 2,500 operators or something like that, I think, in the United States.
The majority with less than 10 airplanes.
Right. So it's a real free-for-all. And, if I were to say, okay, well, I want to, deal with more direct retail, great. I can make a little more margin and whatnot, but it's a whole lot of work. I mean, we know what the brokers go through and having to deal with the concierge element, having to deal with sourcing the aircraft, with the insurance, and what the client needs, and just catering to them. We're focused on operating the airplane, being safe, having well-trained pilots, having a well-appointed interior with a great cabin host, a great flight crew. There's a lot that we do. You can't be good at everything. Yeah. So I think that's why you kind of
lean on, you look at brokers as good partners to your business, right? Where you focus on, all right, I'm going to focus on what I know I can do well, which is operate airplanes, hire trained pilots, maintain airplanes and run a safe maintenance operation. Keep owners happy.
Right.
And you lean on the brokers to then, bring the right clients that is the right profile that would fit on the value that you bring as an airplane operator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, in a perfect world, I always say to our team, I hope we can do more business with less people because, if we have a handful of trusted partner brokers that we really enjoy working with, we have an open, transparent relationship. It's not always about price. It's about getting the mission done, taking care of the client, having a good experience. That being said, sometimes I got a plane that's stuck from here to here and I have to just get it out there.
Whoever's going to take this airplane.
It's something better to get something than nothing at that point.
Yeah.
And so, the goal is to minimize those kind of interactions. But at the same token, it's a great industry win. It's a huge ecosystem.
Yeah.
There's room for everybody.
There is business for everybody. Absolutely.
There really is.
Yeah. Where do you tend to keep your airplanes when you're thinking of like logistically, all right, here's where I want to keep my airplanes? Is there a specific like routes that you tend to keep your airplanes, not guaranteed, but primarily stick to?
Well, our main hubs are basically Van Nuys in Los Angeles here, Opa-locka in Miami, and then 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗀 in New York. So we've got good arrangements with local FBOs there, and those are kind of our hub hinge points.
And you kind of just try and stick within that triangle when you're looking at moving airplanes?
Exactly.
Yep.
We're actually exploring right now. We do a soft launch of Dallas. We looked at some data. I think it came from, I like to watch Doug Golan's private jet comparison. I'm also looking at his data. And then Greg Johnson with 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗀 too. I like both of their data. Use it a lot. But both of their data was showing that Dallas is a pretty frequented market. So we're doing some exploration with starting to set some jets there.
That's interesting. Yeah. I've always had good experiences in and out of the Dallas area, and have seen it increase over the last 2 to 3 years as a market that is starting to grow and grow.
Yeah.
And they don't have, I think they're more of a home-based style market. I don't think they've got the guys that operate the Lear 60s, ATI, which is now Jet Via. I don't know exactly. But they've operated, but they're really the only ones that were kind of floating airplanes in and out. And they were just Lear 60s. Right. I think they put a purchase in for a new Challenger 3500, but that's interesting because I think it's maybe like a little bit of an untouched market of moving airplanes in and out. I know the LA market, because that's just more mine, to back and forth in Dallas. Is there like a Dallas, Florida market or Texas, Florida market at all?
We have seen directions of travel in all areas. Yeah. Actually, I mean, there's a lot of stuff down to Mexico as well.
Yeah. I know there's a good Cabo market from Houston, Texas.
And then Aspen as well. A lot of Texas towards Colorado kind of flights.
Yeah.
So it just kind of works nice to keep more options open, for us. We had done London in the past was one of our hubs. We would do point-to-point over to Europe, but we stopped doing that. It just got, again, because of the complexities, it just got too difficult.
Yeah.
And the ultra-long range kind of transatlantic stuff, it's really owned by Vista. It's really hard to compete with their globals. These brand new globals and free Wi-Fi and all these things. So
you're making money on those?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah. Seems difficult to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to compete with that kind of model, especially. I mean, I know the latest thing I saw was the free de-icing was another thing that's going on out there, and that could be a huge cost.
Yeah.
To absorb on a smaller operator scale, like like Prime Jet.
Yeah. Where do you see Prime Jet's fleet kind of moving towards in the next couple years?
So we're actually working on quite a few irons in the fire right now. We're looking at about another 5 aircraft to add over the next quarter or two. So we are still staying, Gulfstream focused. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't entertain something different.
Yeah.
But I mean, I see it moving towards, eventually, in the next at least a year, it's going to be G4SP, I think a lot.
Yeah.
And then over time, I think more of the 450s, 550s.
Of those airplanes, what's your favorite one to operate?
I like the G450.
Yeah.
Like I said, from the ownership standpoint, I think they're not happy because the cost of maintenance are so high on it. Yeah. But that plane just sells because it's got the new IOM. It's really beautiful inside. It's just got that tag of the G450. And it's been our most successful airplane charter-wise, at least the last.
How's operating costs on it compared to the 4?
Because of the maintenance contracts, it's a lot more.
Yeah.
The fuel burn's identical, essentially. But
what's the main difference between the 450 and the 4 or the 4SP?
Avionics in the cockpit, really.
Yeah.
Like I said, from a passenger perspective, you couldn't tell the difference at all.
That's why it's so hard to it's like, oh, do I spend an extra $5 million on this 450 when it's like sitting in the back? I can't really tell. The operating costs aren't that different. I guess maybe they'll hold the value a little bit more.
Yeah, and the longevity's there because they're just newer and they more than likely have a lower time on them.
But on average, how long are people holding on to airplanes for?
In our case at Prime Jet?
Yeah.
Trying to think. I mean, most of our owners are all real long term. So, I mean, like I said,
they're not trading airplanes too frequently.
We have one owner that does do like a lot of buying and selling. So he'll trade from time to time, but he stays within the G4 and 450 family for the most part. So, him aside, most of our owners are, have their jet and essentially want to stick with it.
Yeah.
Like I said, some of the G5 owners right now are looking at the cost and saying, gosh, this is so much cost and I can't charter enough to get this where I want to get it. So maybe I'm going to move back into a G4.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just cause like they'll sell it. That difference in sale price, that'll let them operate this airplane for another 2 or 3 years, just in that the purchase price cost difference. That's interesting. If people want to contact you, they want to charter with you, what's the best way to get a hold of people at Prime Jet?
So best way is you can call us on our main number, 303-792-2374. Send an email to sales@PrimeJet. We monitor that 24/7. We've got a team abroad over in the Philippines and Malaysia that handles our night stuff, and a really great team.
I love I've got the team in the Philippines. They do a fantastic job.
Thank you.
They are the hardest working people I've ever worked with.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah.
Melanie's our girl in the Philippines, and she's been with us now for, I think, pretty much 12 years.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and she does a great job over there, and makes our lives great because we can actually sleep at night and have a life. And
what do you guys prefer for taking inbound? Would you prefer Avinode request, like a massed email blast, or a phone call?
Right now, the preferred is definitely going to be Avinode, simply because it integrates directly with our Flex scheduling software. Yeah. So it just makes the transactional time that much faster.
Yeah.
That being said, there's an AI tool actually in Flex now that we can take an email and forward it to this address, and it transcribes automatically and builds it into our scheduling system. So another use of AI there.
Yeah. I was actually looking at the Flex on the broker side too. So that was like that. They do the same thing where I think if someone emails me just a PDF, let's say it's not through Avinode, theoretically the AI reads it, transcribes it, then uploads it into the system.
Exactly. So you're not sitting there building in the customer and the account and the route and all that by hand.
Yeah.
So
the
more we can do to automate,
I like what the guys are doing now. It was a long process for us to implement Flex when I was at 𝗀𝗃, but I think they've gotten over that hump now, and I think there was a lot of good lessons learned in a 2-year implementation process.
100%. Yeah, I know we talked a lot to Clay when we were making the decision to go into it, because we knew they were kind of the first ones there as well. And but we've been super happy with it.
Yeah. A lot of growing pains, and I think they've done. Awesome, Andrew. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate you. I feel like we just chatted Gulfstreams the whole time, but I feel like it's like it fits your, probably more than most people what it takes to operate a Gulfstream and the ins and outs of it.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I love what you're doing here, and
awesome.
Keep watching your content myself too.
Thanks, man. I'll keep trying. Got to get good guests though.
That's right.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. That wraps up another episode of the Ironbird Podcast. A huge thank you to Andrew at Prime Jet. If you want to learn more about Andrew and how he operates Gulfstreams, you can go to primejets.com. That's JETS.com. If you want to learn more about Ironbird, you can go to our website at flyironbird.com. Thanks again.